You remember The Witcher, the episode where Geralt enters a ruined castle, where something shrieks in the dark, crawling on walls, hunting by night, the Striga. A cursed princess, born wrong, feared before she ever chose evil. But here's the truth most viewers never hear. That monster was not invented for the show. The Striga is ancient, far older than Geralt, far older than medieval fantasy. And the legend that inspired it is far more terrifying than anything on screen. Because in Slavic folklore, the Striga was not created by magic. It was born.
Imagine being born not once, but twice. Only for that second birth to damn you to a life of blood, hunger, and terror. This is not a nightmare. This is the curse of the Striga. In the dark forests and isolated villages of the Slavic world, birth was never a moment of pure joy. It was a moment of fear. When a child cried for the first time, the room would fall silent, not in celebration, but in scrutiny. Midwives did not look for beauty, they did not look for strength, they looked for signs. Because some children, they believed, were born already touched by death. A newborn with two hearts beating out of rhythm, a child born with 2 rows of teeth, sharp and unnatural. Sometimes a baby that cried with a voice too deep, too aware. But the most terrifying sign was invisible. The belief that the child carried 2 souls within a single body.
Striga.
This child was called Striga. To the villagers, it was not fully human. It walked, spoke, and grew like any other child, but everyone knew the truth. It would not stay that way. It would live once as a person and live again after death. The Striga was believed to be born already marked, destined to rise from its grave, driven by the soul that refused to leave. Death was not the end of its story. Death was only the beginning. Families whispered, neighbors watched, every illness, every strange behavior was remembered. Because when this child died, whether from sickness, age, or violence, the village would not mourn. They would prepare. They believed some graves were never meant to stay closed. Unlike ordinary vampires, unlike curses spread by bites or dark rituals, the Striga carried its damnation from birth. Slavic belief held that the Striga was born with 2 souls bound inside a single body. One soul was human. It laughed, loved, suffered, and aged like any other. The second soul was something else entirely. It did not sleep, it did not forget, and it did not forgive the living. When death finally came, the first soul departed, following the path of the dead. But the second soul refused to leave. It remained trapped within the corpse. And when the earth was packed down, when prayers were spoken, when the living turned their backs, that second soul awoke. Driven by hunger, memory, and rage, it forced the body to rise. Not as a spirit, not as a ghost, but as something far worse, a walking corpse animated by a soul that should never have existed. This is why the Striga was feared more than demons. A demon could be banished, a ghost could be appeased. But the Striga was not summoned, it was inevitable. Even before death, the knowledge poisoned its life. Children suspected of being Striga were never truly children. They were watched, studied, feared. Every sickness was taken as a warning. Every bad dream became evidence. Some were abandoned at the edge of forests. Some were smothered quietly in their sleep, for the good of the village. Others were allowed to live, but never trusted. They grew up beneath careful eyes, surrounded by whispers, knowing that when they died, the real fear would begin. Because for the Striga, life was only the first chapter, and death was merely the doorway. When the Striga returned, it was not the pale, tragic vampire of later legends. It did not seduce. It did not mourn its condition. It hunted. By night, the grave itself became a doorway. Villagers told of earth found disturbed, coffins split from the inside, lids clawed open by hands that should no longer move. The Striga did not rise gracefully. It forced its way back into the world. Those who claimed to see it described the same terror. Eyes that glowed in the dark or burned red with fresh blood. Fingers twisted into claws, nails split and sharpened by hunger. Its body was wrong, sometimes shriveled and leathery like something dried by death, other times grotesquely bloated, swollen with stolen life. And when it screamed, it did not sound human. It cried like a bird of prey, high, piercing, and sudden, an echo that froze blood and sent dogs into panic long before the monster was seen. The Striga fed on blood, but blood was not enough. It tore into flesh, devouring organs while its victims still lived. Hearts, livers, lungs, taken as if the creature was trying to replace something missing inside itself. By morning, livestock lay butchered in fields. Chickens and goats drained and torn apart. Worse still were the children, found pale and cold in their beds, marked by wounds no animal could make. The Striga did not hide in distant castles or ancient ruins. It stayed close. It crept through graveyards, perched on rooftops, and stalked the edges of villages where the living met the dead. And no matter how far it wandered, no matter how many nights passed, it always returned to the place where it was born. Because the Striga did not hunt strangers alone. It hunted home. Stopping a Striga was never simple. It required precision, knowledge, and a kind of courage born only from desperation. Villagers understood one terrible truth. If they were wrong, if they misidentified the creature or acted too late, the cost would not be a single life, but many. The rituals used against a Striga were brutal, because the threat was absolute. When suspicion fell upon a corpse, graves were reopened under moonlight. The body was examined for signs of false death. Unnatural swelling, fresh blood at the mouth, eyes that seemed to watch even in death. If confirmed, the first act was often decapitation. The head was severed and placed between the legs, or buried separately, an attempt to confuse the second soul and prevent it from finding its way back to the body. This was not punishment, it was disruption. Others drove iron or wooden stakes through the chest, pinning the corpse to the earth. Iron, feared by spirits, was believed to sever supernatural bonds. Wood taken from sacred or thorny trees symbolized life turned against itself. The goal was always the same, to stop the second soul from moving. Some corpses were buried face down, forced to dig deeper into the earth instead of clawing upward. Sickles, thorns, or sharp branches were placed across the throat or inside the coffin, ensuring that if the body stirred, it would destroy itself in the attempt to rise. When fear reached its breaking point, there was only one solution left: fire. Burning the body was seen as final, a way to erase both flesh and soul, undoing the Striga's second birth entirely. Ash could not rise. Ash could not hunt. But beneath every ritual was a deeper belief. These acts weren't just meant to kill. They were meant to unmake, to reverse the unnatural doubling of life, to sever the second soul's connection to the world of the living, to deny the Striga the rebirth it was promised. Yet none of this mattered if the creature was not recognized in time. If the villagers failed to identify the Striga before burial, it could haunt them for years, sometimes decades, feeding slowly, patiently, wearing down entire bloodlines. Some legends whisper something even worse. That certain Striga could walk by day, wearing a human face, speaking with familiar voices, sitting at family tables, waiting for night to fall. Because the most dangerous Striga was not the one in the grave, but the one you failed to recognize. Before Dracula walked his castle halls, before Nosferatu cast his shadow across silent films, there was the Striga. Long before vampire myths were shaped into romance and tragedy, the Slavic world feared something older, rawer, and far less merciful. Many folklorists believe the Striga stands among the earliest foundations of Eastern European vampire traditions, a creature that defined what it meant to return from the dead long before fangs and coffins became symbols. Unlike later vampires, the Striga did not need to be bitten, cursed, or invited into darkness. It required no infection, no seduction, no transformation. It was born. Its fate was sealed at birth, feared even while it still breathed. While later vampires were once ordinary humans who fell into monstrosity, the Striga was believed to carry death within it from the very beginning. This is why it inspired deeper terror than creatures that came after. It was not a mistake or a punishment. It was destiny. The very name Striga likely traces back to Strix, a figure from Roman mythology, a night demon in the shape of a screeching bird that fed on the blood of infants. As Roman beliefs merged with Slavic traditions, the Striga absorbed traits of both: the hunger of a predator, the scream of a bird of prey, and the unnatural bond between death and rebirth. Over centuries, the Striga evolved. In some regions, it blurred into the vampire. In others, it took on the traits of witches, revenants, and night demons. Its form shifted, but its essence remained the same. What set the Striga apart in Slavic memory was not how it fed, but why it existed. Vampires were made. Striga were fated. They were monsters not because they chose evil, but because the world believed they could be nothing else. A being condemned before its first breath, feared before its first step, and hunted long before its second life began. In this way, the Striga was not just a monster of folklore. It was the ancestor of fear itself. The Striga represents a fear far older than monsters. It is the fear that evil can be inherited, that some people are born carrying a darkness they never chose, that death does not end suffering, but sharpens it. At its core, the Striga is the terror of not belonging, of being feared by your own people, of being watched, judged, and condemned long before you ever become what they fear. And that is why the Striga never truly disappeared. It simply learned to wear new names. One of the clearest modern echoes appears in Andrzej Sapkowski's The Witcher. In the very first short story, The Striga, a cursed princess becomes a night-hunting monster, intelligent, brutal, and bound to her birthplace. Though the spelling changes, the soul of the creature remains unmistakably Slavic, born cursed, feared before death, and transformed into a predator by fate rather than choice. This vision carried forward into the Witcher video games, where Striga-like creatures stalk ruins and villages, returning night after night, driven by memory and hunger. They're not mindless beasts, they're hunters that remember who they once were. The horror lies not in what they do, but in what they used to be. In Netflix's The Witcher series, the Striga reaches millions of viewers worldwide, reintroducing ancient Slavic folklore to modern audiences. The creature's design, twisted limbs, predatory movement, animalistic screams, echoes the old legends almost perfectly. It isn't a vampire in a cape, it is a curse given flesh. Beyond The Witcher, the Striga's influence spreads quietly through horror cinema and literature. Films centered on children born wrong, revenants that rise without infection, and monsters bound to bloodlines all echo the same ancient idea. These are not creatures created by accidents, they are inevitable outcomes. In dark fantasy novels and horror fiction, the theme of the double-souled being appears again and again. Characters who carry something inside them that cannot be exorcised. Authors may not call it a Striga, but the bones of the myth are still there. Even in visual art and illustration, especially within Eastern European and Slavic-inspired fantasy, the Striga endures. Artists depict emaciated revenants perched on rooftops, bird-like predators with human eyes, corpses half returned from the grave. These images tap into the same ancient terror. The body that rises not because it wants to, but because it must. The Striga still resonates today because it removes comfort. There is no bite to avoid, no curse to break easily, no moment where everything could have gone differently. The Striga is terrifying because it suggests that monstrosity is not always created. Sometimes it is assigned at birth. And that leaves us with a final, unsettling question. If someone is feared from the moment they are born, if the world treats them as a monster long before they act like one, at what point do they truly become it? Or worse? What if the line between human and monster was always thinner than we believed? So if you ever hear a scream in the night, sharp enough to cut through sleep, winged, like something circling just beyond the roof, and it sounds too close to ignore, remember this. Not every grave holds the dead. Not every child was meant for only one life, and some graves were never meant to stay closed.
Thank you for watching. Please like, share, and subscribe.